On today's show, we'll be talking about teens under pressure. We'll be talking with Dr. Greg Hammer, who will offer real practices for helping our teens not just cope with life, but come to enjoy it. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about unlocking the resilient leader in you. You're a wonderful audience, and I've said that to you before, and I really mean it. You just keep growing, and you stay with me, and I am thrilled. But I want to hear from you. I really want to hear about what you like, what you want to hear more of, what I'm missing, whatever it is. Just send me an email, madeline@madelineblair.com. Thanks so much. When I was growing up as a teenager, my biggest concern was, have I finished enough chores so I can go out in the woods? Or when's dinner? That's about what I thought about. Today's teens are living under a kind of pressure I never experienced or would have imagined. It's coming from all directions: social media, smartphones, political division that seeps into families, rising academic competition, the lingering effects of COVID isolation. The results are sobering. In 2003, 40% of US high school students reported persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. And that's an increase of 10% over the 10 years before. And between 2007 and 2021, suicide deaths among 10 to 24-year-olds increased by 62%. You heard it right, 10 years old to 24, that suicides are increasing. It's actually the second leading cause of death for this age group. These aren't just numbers. They represent real young people, our children, our grandchildren, our students, neighbors, who are struggling in ways that are too often invisible until a crisis emerges. Not all of us have teenagers as children, I know that. But we all have teens in our lives. I don't care whether it's a niece or a nephew or a person who serves you at the restaurant. In this awkward time of being somewhere between childhood and adulthood, one of the most promising approaches for supporting teens is mindfulness, not a trendy buzzword, but as a set of practical, science-based strategies that can help young people rewire their brains, manage anxiety, and build resilience in the face of real pressures. My guest today brings a rare combination of perspectives to this conversation. Dr. Greg Hammer is a former professor at Stanford University School of Medicine, a pediatric intensive care physician, an anesthesiologist, a best-selling author, and a widely respected mindfulness expert. He's taught mindfulness to medical students, to residents, and professionals around the world. Greg understands both the clinical realities and the human experience of teen mental health. And in his latest book, A Mindful Teen, he offers parents, educators, and caregivers practical tools to help teens navigate anxiety and depression and to strengthen the bonds that make those conversations possible. Greg Hammer, welcome back to Unlocked.
Wonderful to see you again, Madeline.
It's always a pleasure when we talk because you bring such substance to the audience. But I want to begin with a different question. Why do you write a book about teens? I want to really get to know the answer. Why?
I raised a couple, of course, and I've taken care of them, excuse me, all my life. And I just recognize what a difficult time it is for all of us. But in particular for teens, you named some of the primary challenges they face. Social media, which is, of course, a double-edged sword, like most technologic advances. And we're dealing with AI now, which is certainly in that category. But really, all technologic advances have sort of a pro and a con side. When the radio became popular, people thought we're never going to get together in person anymore. They're just going to listen to the radio. Or the same thing with television and then certainly the internet. But social media, though it has a lot of utility, it also exposes teens to perfection in body image, which may cause them to be ashamed of their own physical appearance. It's also a conduit for bullying, shaming, something called sextortion, where teens have perhaps posted pictures of themselves, sent it to a friend, a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. So there are a lot of pitfalls with regard to social media that you and I did not have to deal with. You mentioned the political divide. I think things are absolutely out of control right now, and this affects families and has an effect on teens. Gun violence in schools, certainly we never had to worry about. We did nuclear fallout drills, if you remember.
Yes, I did. I do.
I don't think we really took that too seriously. It was fun.
Yeah.
We didn't feel anxiety related to that. But gun violence is a totally different story. Now, a lot of schools have metal detectors that kids have to pass through when they go to school. Other issues that we never faced, besides smartphones, gun violence, eco-anxiety. Is there going to be a world for my kids and my grandkids to inhabit?
Yeah.
Just terrible stories of floods and storms and so on. There certainly is climate change. I realize that not everyone believes that we as humans are contributing to it, but nevertheless, an issue for teens to deal with.
Yeah.
You mentioned college admissions. I had guests over the weekend. One of them was the associate dean for admissions at the University of Virginia. So we talked a lot about the reasons that colleges are so difficult to get into now. But I have an 18-year-old that I've taken care of, and I know that many of her friends didn't get into college or maybe got into a safety school, even though they had lots of AP classes, 4.0 GPAs, extracurricular activities. So perhaps the population has outgrown the capacity of colleges and universities to some degree. That's a contributor, but it's a source of anxiety for a lot of teenagers for sure. So there's just a multiplicity of things that you and I really didn't have to deal with. And these sort of are in our faces. And I think it's really the recognition of that which propelled me to write this book.
I'm very happy that you have, because for my own self, I see the young people as the future. They are our future parents. They are our future leaders. Everything is depending on them. So we really do need to be attentive to them. So that's part of my passion for working with teenagers. You've spent years as a physician and mindfulness expert working with young people. What's the most urgent change that you're seeing in teen mental health today?
We've articulated many of the factors that create uncertainty in the future, and that leads to anxiety. So anxiety is certainly a major issue among teens. Depression is, I believe, more prevalent than it has been in the past among this age population, adolescents and pre-adolescents. And this leads to an increase in suicide rates. I live on Stanford campus, which is really a wonderful place to be. I'm surrounded by Palo Alto. My kids went to Palo Alto High School. There have been just a rash of suicides at Palo Alto High School and the other high school in Palo Alto, which is Gun High School. And I know this is not just a local phenomenon. So I think this pressure that teens feel, along with the way that all of us have our brains wired. So, we're wired for negativity. We have a negativity bias. We tend to remember the negative and forget the positive. This is well documented in social and psychology science. And when you combine that with all these other factors, teens and adults in many cases tend to focus on the negative. And when you combine that with another way our brains are wired, we have a hard time being present. And that's really what mindfulness is all about. It's training the mind to be fully present without judgment. And because our brains are wired for negativity and wandering into the future and the past, and when you combine negativity with dwelling on the past, you get depression, and negativity and focus on the future, excessive thinking of the future leads to anxiety. These are two of the more prevalent mental health issues that teens and frankly adults face now. But the good news is our brains have this amazing quality called neuroplasticity. So we can actually change the way our brains are wired. So even though they're wired through evolution for survival, wariness, negativity, obsession with the past and future, we can change the way our brains function, the way they're wired, these connections between neurons called synapses, the crosstalk between neurons. So that's the good news, and that's what mindfulness is all about. I like Dr. John Kabat-Zinn's definition of mindfulness. It's experiencing fully the present moment on purpose, non-judgmentally. And the on purpose means we have to have a plan because our brains are wired for survival and not happiness. And we can change that, but we have to have a plan. It's just if you do nothing with regard to your physical health, you don't exercise, you don't focus on your sleep, you don't eat well, you just lapse into this lazy way of being, your body's going to get out of shape. But the good news is your body will respond to regular exercise, good sleep hygiene, and an improved diet, and that our brains are the same way. So there are issues with the way we think, but we do have the capability of changing the way we think.
You've used the word rewired several times, and I've read about the fact that during the teen years, our brains, and this is what nature has decided, is that the teen time is when it gets rewired. That's what I've read, hoping that's correct. But I'm really curious if you can explain just a little bit more about what it means, because I know there are not wires up there, what it means to rewire things.
And it's very analogous to taking care of your body. You go to the gym, you cycle, you run, whatever you like to do. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And in many ways, the easier it gets to do. Yeah. And the same thing with our brain. And that is what I'm referring to as to how the brain is wired. So for example, let's say every morning you wake up, you've got a little pain in a joint, like your knee, you have stiffness in your knee. And the first thing you do is focus on the fact that your knee hurts. And then you get out of bed and your knee hurts and you're focused on it and you're limping to the bathroom a little bit. The more you do that, the more it becomes an automatic way of thinking. You wake up with this negativity. Whereas if you begin to get yourself in the habit of, when you wake up in the morning, even if you have a pain or an ache somewhere, you think of the miracle of how your physiology was working all night without waking you up. Your heart was pumping, your lungs were working, you were breathing, your kidneys were filtering your blood, sending urine into your bladder. Excuse me for being so graphic, but I'm a physician after all. And your bladder is holding that urine more or less. You may have to get up a couple of times to pee in the night, but in general, all this stuff is going on that's just miraculous. If you start to think about that when you wake up in the morning, instead of this immediate urge to think of something negative, like an ache or a pain, pretty soon you'll find that you're waking up in the morning grateful for being alive and that you woke up and grateful for this day. And the more you think in that way, the more you think in that way. We had an expression that just popped into my head when I was in training. It was the later you stay, the later you stay. Because you find yourself after call and you're really tired, but you got to do this and that. You got to write your notes. And then somebody asks you a question to go see a patient. And pretty soon it's 3:00 in the afternoon when you're supposed to leave at 10:00 in the morning. So the more you do something well, the more you're able to do something. The more you think positive, the more you're going to think positive. The more you think negative, the more you think negative. And so it's amazing how the brain, through all these neural connections, establishes patterns, neural networks that have a lowered threshold for firing together when they're exercised in that way. Negativity or positivity, it's up to us.
Thank you. It's so easy to say it that we rewire. But the question is how. The question in my mind is what should a parent be looking for to see if their child is moving in this direction or not?
There are obvious signs that are known to most of us as parents. We see our kids coming home from school and they're silent. They've got a neutral or unhappy expression on their face. They go in their room and close the door. They barely say hello, if they say hello at all. We notice that they're on their screens more and more, which is generally not a good practice beyond a certain point. We see maybe their academic performance is trailing off. If they're on a team or doing some physical extracurricular thing, my daughter did cheer, maybe their performance is dropping off. We should talk to their teachers and their coaches periodically to check in, even if our kid seems to be doing well. Because the fact is that sometimes we miss the signs, or apparently there are no signs. And the next thing we know, it's a suicide. The significant portion of kids that commit suicide, they're high achievers. They seem to have everything going for them. They're good looking, they're athletic, they're great in school, and then all of a sudden they're gone. And we may have missed those signs, or the signs may not have been there. But less and less friends, less time socializing with their group of friends, grades, academic performance in general, physical issues. So these are some of the signs, but we may not see the signs at all.
May not see the signs at all. That's really a little scary, isn't it?
How many times have we seen parents, the perpetrators of gun violence in school, for example? The neighbors are shocked. This kid seemed like a great kid. He was doing well. He was athletic and good looking. And how could this happen? And sometimes the parents say the same thing. I never imagined my son or daughter would do this. And whether it's gun violence or self-harm, sometimes we miss the signs, and who knows what signs there may have been in retrospect. But yes, unfortunately, that is the way it is with kids.
How do you initiate a conversation with a child and that is exhibiting that way?
I think most parents know what to do when we're driving our teen to an extracurricular activity, a sporting event or whatever. We have some one-on-one time. I think it's individualized. It depends what they might seem to be struggling with. But I would emphasize it's really important to have the difficult conversations, whether it has to do with sex and teen pregnancy or sexually transmitted diseases, or I've noticed that you're less and less interactive with your friends. How is so-and-so doing? How's your relationship with your BFF and so on? Check in with your kids as much as you can. Don't take anything for granted. I think when we're driving them before they're driving themselves, it's a great opportunity. You've got a captive audience. Just periodically just check in on these big sort of bullet points. And the same thing with mealtime. And this is nothing new. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not really a child psychology expert, but I've done a lot of research on issues that teens face in preparation for writing the book. At dinner time, make sure the cell phones are put away and turned off. And what we can talk about is embracing mindfulness principles when you have the opportunity. Teach your kids gratitude. Talk about how grateful, how grateful you are as an adult for your child, your children, your family, your friends, having a safe place to live, having a roof over your head. Talk about sometimes the difficulties going on elsewhere in the world, which are in our face every day, and how lucky we are, how we're grateful for our health. As we've talked before about the GAIN mindfulness practice being an acronym for what I think are the 4 pillars of happiness: gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. So embody these things, embrace them, and exhibit them with your kids. You can't just tell your kids what to do. They're watching us, they're looking at what we do. And so that's why this book is really for parents, teachers, counselors, coaches, other family members, grandparents that may interact with teenagers. And I hope that addresses your question.
Now it begins to, yes. Yes. And I love the fact that you ended with, you better model this, parents,
Exactly.
if you want your children to do it. Talk a little bit more about this GAIN model, because I've always been interested with it. And I love that it always begins with gratitude, because that was one of the things that my mother was incredibly good at. She was the person who would wake up every morning and say, I'm alive. It's a new day. And she always did that. And so I know that part of my wiring probably came from that. But talk about those, and how do you teach it?
Gratitude, you mentioned. I think gratitude is so intrinsic to happiness. We may know somebody, or certainly can imagine someone who's poor and yet happy, or who's physically challenged and happy, but you can't really even imagine somebody who's ungrateful and happy, right? So gratitude is essential to happiness. Acceptance is the acknowledgement that things happening in the world do not necessarily comport with our wants and needs. So we have to figure out, how do we deal with that? So we can learn acceptance. So I think, as you may know, I lost one of my kids at the age of 29, my son, Max. And so when I do my GAIN meditation in the morning, that is the first thing that comes to me under the A of acceptance. So there's pain that we all experience. We've all lost loved ones. We've all had lost a job or lost a friend. So many things happening in the world. Life is difficult under the best of circumstances. So we can try not to think about things, or we can, as appropriate, to an appropriate extent, intentionally think of those things. So when we do the GAIN meditation, we actually take something painful or uncomfortable, and as we're doing our slow, deep, deliberate breathing, we bring that into our heart. We imagine opening our chest, opening our heart, bringing this experience and thought into our heart, and just breathing into it and relaxing our body as we do. And we ask ourselves the question at some point, can I live with this pain forever? And the answer will be yes. We can live with it. We can't change it. So let's accept it. The I in GAIN is intention. And that gets back to the fact that our brains are wired in ways that apparently interfere with our ability to be happy. We have this negativity bias. We have a hard time being present. And being present is really where happiness lives. It's like when you're taking that hike in the forest and you feel that soft pine needle floor, and you look at these beautiful old trees, and you look up and you see the sun filtering through the canopy 100 feet above. You're not thinking about something you said that you're embarrassed about yesterday, or the list of things you have to do when you get home. You're really right there at that moment. And when you have those moments, you're liberated, you're happy. And so we have to apply a practice in order to experience that more fully, more frequently. And then finally, the N in GAIN is non-judgment, because it's our nature, it's the way our brains are wired to judge everything in our environment, others, the world, ourselves, and we often do so negatively. So again, the good news is we can rewire our brains away from this negative judgment of others, the world, and ourselves. I think the last part of that is probably the most difficult. At least it is for me. It's letting go of self-judgment, negative self-judgment. So in the GAIN practice, we get up in the morning, we open the blinds, we do our morning hygiene, we find a comfortable, quiet place to sit, we close our eyes, we do slow, deep, deliberate breathing, which we can talk about, such a fundamental element of all forms of meditation. We do a self-guided tour through the GAIN elements. We return to our focus on the slow, deep, deliberate breath, and then slowly open our eyes, and we're ready to go out in the world. And what happens, Madeline, is the more you do this, the more you're grateful, accepting, intentional, and non-judgmental. And so you do your GAIN practice, you have a cup of coffee, you get in your car to drive to work, somebody cuts you off on the road, you start to make all these negative judgments. A light bulb goes off. You have that light bulb moment. I just did my game practice, including non-judgment, and here I am thinking all these negative thoughts. Let's just let go of that. It's not necessary to judge. Let's just see the world not through the lens of negative judgment, but just for what it is. That's a person driving the car, and could have been me. Who knows why they're in a hurry? Maybe there's no reason, but it doesn't matter. I don't need to judge that person. And so we have these light bulb moments as we reinforce these important principles.
As you were talking, it occurred to me, I don't know why it took me so long to put these two things together, but oftentimes when you ask someone to critique, say, a paper that you've written, the instant thing, or maybe I should say the automatic thing, is that they need to find what's wrong with it so that you can improve it. And yet I have worked with people who always begin with, I loved this aspect of what you're saying here. And then they would they would eventually get down to a few things that were wrong, but they would always make sure that they told me what they really agreed with, or what they really liked, or what was really powerful. And it was entirely different experience when people did that. And in fact, those are the people I go back to. Would you read, how about this paper? Because you know you're going to get much more out of it. Because in the end, you learn from knowing what's right, what's good.
Absolutely. If I'm at a meeting and I'm listening to a lecture and I have a question or perhaps a constructive criticism to offer, I always start with great talk, maybe another positive comment, and then I'll ask my question, which, makes it seem a lot less negative. Yeah. In fact, it's not negative at all. It's either a question or it might be a criticism of sorts. But yes, I think that's a great way to communicate, is to be positive. Yeah. And that's not always the way we communicate. Let's face it.
No, it isn't. And you're right. We make that assumption about the negative side. I really love this. And also the intention piece. Because one of the things I've discovered as a manager is that if my intention for someone is to learn a particular new process, say, they end up doing it. They end up learning it. But if my intention is to test them, to see how well they'll do, it's a very different experience. It's a very different performance that comes out of them. So it's as if my intentions are actually affecting them.
Absolutely. We learn from each other to some degree. We may serve as examples for others. And I think, of course, that's particularly important with our kids, regardless of their age or stage of development, starting with our kids as infants and toddlers. But certainly by the teen years, we lead by example. We teach our teens behaviors through our own behaviors, which hopefully include these gain elements, including intention. Yes, nothing comes easy. We have to work for it. And the more we work for something, the more success we will experience. And you embody that, and that's how your teen learns from you. Yes, it's important to verbalize these principles, but if you're not living them, if you're not living examples, your teens are quickly going to see through that. So yes, I mean, we need to lead by example, as if you will.
I can tell you that I do a lot of work in storytelling, and executives who are trying to tell stories, and they talk about the structure, all that sort of thing. And I say, but do you believe this story? I say, because if it's authentically told, believe me, your staff are going to accept it. And then they go, and they realize they have to be saying what they really believe. Yeah, authenticity. I'm curious, is it possible or effective or useful for us to do a little bit of mindful meditation here, just so people can see about?
Absolutely. Yes, of course. So the gain practice, as I said, we get up in the morning hygiene, find a quiet, comfortable place to sit, and then we close our eyes and we focus on our breath. So slow, deep inhalation through the nose, expanding the chest, expanding the belly, filling our lungs. This actually activates the vagus nerve, which induces a sense of calm and has other physiologic benefits. So we're breathing in slowly, maybe to a count of 3 through our nose, pausing, holding that expanded chest and abdomen to a count of 3, and then just letting it go without any effort to a count of 4. So in to a count of 3, pausing to a count of 3, exhaling to a count of 4. And we repeat this a few times. And then as we continue to do our slow, deep, deliberate breathing, we think about gratitude. I'm so grateful for today. It beats the alternative. I'm here, I'm alive today. I'm also grateful for my loved ones, my partner, my children, my family, my dear friends. I'm grateful for this comfortable, safe place to live, which for most of us, we have a roof over our head, we have running water. For me, the miracle of just getting in the shower and there's running water and I can control the temperature. I'm grateful for all of the comforts in my life and the people in my life. I'm grateful. We transition then as we continue to do our slow, deep, deliberate breathing to the A in gain. As the Serenity Prayer would have it, there are things in the world that don't comport with our apparent wants and needs. They're painful experiences. And if we determine whether we can change them or we can't change them, and we decide that we cannot change them, then let's accept them. So let's focus on something uncomfortable that we can't change. And as we do our slow, deep, deliberate breathing, actually imagine bringing this experience closer and closer physically, opening my chest, opening my heart, bringing this experience into my heart as we do our slow, deep, deliberate breathing, breathing into it and relaxing our body into it and sitting with it as we breathe. So for me, it's often the death of my son, but it's something for all of us is painful and uncomfortable. And we hold that in our heart as we breathe slowly, deeply, and deliberately. And we ask ourselves the question, can I live with this pain forever? And the answer eventually is yes, I can. And as we continue our breathing, we transition to the I in gain, which is intention. And we focus our attention on this intention. And that might be, for example, today, 5 seconds of just thinking about my current physical experience, the pressure of the chair against my body, the sound of a car or an airplane passing in the distance, maybe the sound of the heat coming on in my house or the air conditioning or some other sound of a bird outside. We focus our attention on what's happening right now, maybe only for 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And then maybe next week or next month, it's a little bit more and a little bit more. And we repeat this on a daily basis. And again, we're actually rewiring our brain to be more aware of what's happening in the present moment. And we set our intention to do. And then as we do our slow, deep, deliberate breathing, enjoying the passage of air in through our nose, pausing as our chest is full, and then slowly letting the breath go, we think about the N in gain, which is non-judgment. So one little model that I enjoy myself and I teach is, let's picture an image of the Earth apparently floating in space, one of these beautiful NASA images. And the Earth is lovely, but it really doesn't possess the qualities of goodness or badness. It just is the planet that it is. And we focus on this. The Earth is just the planet that it is. And then it's only logical, since I'm part of the Earth in a way, to think that I too am neither good nor bad. I'm just the person that I am. I simply am the person that I am, neither good nor bad. I simply am. And then we may just repeat to ourselves, I am, and link that to our slow, deep, deliberate breathing. And we do this for 30 seconds. And then we return our focus purely to the breath and then slowly open our eyes. And we're ready to go out in the world. And we've already, just in that few minutes, begun to rewire our brain in the direction of greater gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. And then when we find during the day we recognize we're being ungrateful. We're focusing on something negative instead of all the positive things. A light bulb goes off. And the more we do this practice, the more light bulb moments we have. And when we start to redirect our thoughts, when we have that light bulb moment, we're further rewiring our brains. So this is a self-propelling process, if you will. Very simple process.
I have to tell you a little story. And it's occurring to me as you walk me through this meditation. I would say it was maybe 10 years ago. I just decided, I can't tell you why, that I would thank my husband for everything that he did. Maybe he drove me to some meeting. Okay, I would thank him for that. If he handed me the salt shaker at the table, I would thank him for that. And I said, I'm going to give this a year. And I did it for an entire year. Finally, I told him what I was doing. And what was so amazing is that I didn't have to tell him because he had already begun to thank me for things. And as we were going through this meditation, I'm thinking, now that acceptance piece, now that's one of the things that happened is that, okay, that irritates me, but why? I don't need to change it. It's just who he is. It's just who he is. Now, I've been married a very long time.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Very long time. And I'm seeing now the pieces that have made this possible. So thank you for that.
No, that's beautiful. I love that, Madeline. I'm the same way. I thank people for everything. I notice that I listen to National Public Radio in the morning when I'm having coffee and maybe doing a crossword puzzle. And I love the fact that they thank each other. So they'll bring on somebody to do a report and they'll thank them for reporting afterwards. And then the other person says, you're welcome. Instead of just transitioning to the next piece, there's a bit of gratitude in there. And I love that. It's a very small thing, but it's also very vital and constructive.
It says so many things to the other person. It says, I see you, for one thing. It's a real acknowledgement that you exist. You couldn't thank them unless you had seen what they had done. Yeah. And people they always need to be seen, actually. We need that. You're not a psychologist, and nor am I, but I know that much. Okay. I think you've addressed some of this, but it's always worthwhile to go over it again, because now we have the gain model in our minds. When parents feel powerless when their teens are struggling, what are some things they can do right now that genuinely make a difference?
I think, first of all, we as parents and educators, coaches, counselors, make sure that we're embodying the principles that we want to demonstrate for our teens. And so I think when we have a struggling teen, the first thing is to really check in with them. This demonstrates that we care, that we want to know what they're going through. So get into a one-on-one situation or maybe a family situation at the dinner table and ask questions gently about what's happening for you right now. How is this? How is that? I think just checking in and demonstrating how much we care, and then have a little gratitude exercise at the dinner table. Go around the table, or just one of the parents perhaps indicate how grateful they are for the family, for a roof over their head, for the delicious food that's on the table. So I think when we see our teens struggling, we need to go back to these principles. First, check in. We recognize all the difficulties and challenges they face, so let's talk about them when appropriate. And I think we know what to do for the most part. Just embody that love and these principles of gratitude, acceptance, intention, non-judgment, and really check in.
Going back to some of the earlier things that you said, I can also see parents initiating that conversation by telling their child, their teen, whatever, what's happened in their life for that day. so that it's not, I'm pulling things out of you. It's, we're sharing this together. And I could really see that as a way to open the door to that kind of conversation. Yeah,
I certainly agree.
The more I keep thinking about this, the more I keep seeing, okay, now how can I model this? And I'm thinking even of the young people that work for me. Am I doing this with them? I try to, certainly. But I like this model. And it actually begins with the gratitude and then acceptance, because acceptance is incredibly important. Teens, I coach a lot of teens, and all you have to do is listen to them and accept where they are. And they're incredibly grateful. And as soon as they know that you're doing that, their whole mind opens up and you can say things to them they actually take in. Yeah.
I think we need to recognize that teens, their prefrontal cortex is still developing, and they're really vulnerable for a lot of negativity and self negativity, shame, regret, focusing on something negative they said or did, and maybe I don't fit in, maybe I'm a nerd, maybe nobody likes me. And I think when we interact with our kids, do so in a non-judgmental way. Check in with them without judging them, because they're really sensitive to being judged. I think much more so than we adults who are a bit more self-assured. So again, the end game, I think, is crucial. And these elements really are all interrelated. If we're really, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for having you as my child. I'm grateful, so grateful for our relationship. So that radiates non-judgment, and the fact that I'm grateful for you means I accept you.
Yes.
So these elements are really interrelated, but we can focus on them individually. And I think so important not to judge our teens, because they are very sensitive to being judged. They judge themselves with negativity enough. They don't need our judging them as well.
That's right. When you said the fact that their prefrontal cortex is still developing, it doesn't even finish its work until you're what, about 25?
And if you're a male, 40.
I won't say that. That also tells me why they are so sensitive to negative things, because they haven't developed this thing in our heads that allows us to see things logically. We can compare, we can contrast, we can make judgments. That's missing until it's not completely missing, but it's forming.
Yes.
It's like asking a child to do pull-ups when in fact their arms aren't strong enough to do pull-ups or something. That's a bad example, but I think you get the message. Now, I always ask myself, why did nature decide to do it this way? And why did it take so long before I know why. I love to do this exercise. Why did nature do that? And here's my postulation. I'm thinking that the brain is very efficient. In fact, the body's very efficient. And until you're ready to act, because you have the physicality of an adult, why waste energy creating a part of your brain? It's for adulthood. Okay, I'll stop speculating. But I love to have things like that where I think it through and say, why did that happen? But it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Why do our minds work this way? Why do we have a negativity bias? I really think that it's, from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense. 200,000 years ago, our forebears may have been sitting in a cave, trying to keep the fire going, caring for our family, recognizing there could be a predator, a saber-toothed tiger lurking outside the mouth of the cave. Yeah. And so if we were wary and catastrophized and thought of the worst thing that might happen, it might actually help us survive. It might prolong our life and allow us to have more offspring. Yeah. And so these genes and epigenetic factors that code for this wariness, this negativity, propagated in the population. And here we are 200,000 years later, and our brains are wired this way through evolution. But we're not any longer faced with predation for the most part. There's not something life-threatening lurking around the corner for most of us almost all the time. And therefore, we have to learn how to train our minds to this new current reality. And we don't have to be so wary. We don't have to be always thinking of the worst thing that might happen. So I think of processes in our mind as adaptive or maladaptive. So for me as an anesthesiologist, it's adaptive to think of the worst thing that might happen. So I can take precautionary measures and prevent
That's
it from
right.
happening. But it's not adaptive in everyday life to think of the worst thing that might happen all the time. That's going to immediately trigger fear and anxiety. So let's think of things that way. Is this an adaptive way to be and to think, or is it a maladaptive way to be and think? And we can guide ourselves in a more adaptive direction. It makes a lot of sense. And I think, again, the analogies between our mind and our physical body are a very good analogy. Does our physical body have to be ready to fight or flee every moment, like perhaps was much more prevalent 200,000 years ago? No. And so when we recognize that we're having this fear reaction, when our sympathetic nervous system is being activated, we recognize our heart rate's going up. Maybe we're a little sweaty or jittery because we're anxious about something. Have that light bulb moment where we ask ourselves, is this an adaptive response right now? Am I overreacting? Can I bring myself back to a sense of calm? Can I activate my parasympathetic nervous system and keep my sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight part of our unconscious nervous system, in check? And that's exactly what slow, deep, deliberate breathing does. So just the breath work, expanding our lungs, being present, that activates the parasympathetic nervous system through the vagus nerve, slows our heart rate, lowers our blood pressure, and gives us a sense of calm. So let's, again, recognize, is this adaptive or maladaptive? Let's not just be passive participants. Let's ask ourselves these questions when we are getting fearful, anxious, or sad.
Wow. Lots to think about. And with such positive impact, if we do it right. Greg, is there any final thoughts you want to leave, or have you given us all the gems you want to share today?
A last thought, Madeline, might be that sometimes I think we, in our negative self-judgment, think that we're the only one who has these dark feelings, feels as though we've failed with our kids, for example, or has a lot of doubt about ourselves or regret. This is the way our brains are wired. We're wired to be generally somewhat negative, and it's not your dirty little secret for anybody who's listening. It's the way all of us are wired. We're all the same, much more alike than we are different. And so when you start to have those negative self-judgments, just recognize that this is just the mind. And the good news is we can practice being more positive and less judgmental, and gradually, slowly, baby steps forward, we can learn to drop the self-judgment and the judgment of others, the world as well. So that's my closing thing, is for anybody who's listening, don't feel like these are your dirty little secrets. We all have those thoughts. We're all much more the same than we are different.
Dr. Greg Hammer, thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Great to be with you as always.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself.
As I listened to Greg Hammer describe the GAIN practice, gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment, I found myself nodding again and again. His words brought to mind something I often say on this show, that resilience is the decision of how we will respond to the unexpected. Greg's work is all about that decision. And interestingly, so is one of the oldest schools of thought we know, Stoicism. Both GAIN and Stoicism remind us that strength doesn't come from controlling what happens. It comes from choosing how we meet it. Gratitude, the decision to see what is good. Greg begins with gratitude. He invites us to train our minds to look for what is right, even in moments that feel wrong. The Stoics would have recognized this immediately. They called it amor fati, the love of one's fate. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything thrown into it." In other words, life throws what it will. The decision is ours. Will we burn or will we illuminate? When Greg teaches gratitude, he isn't suggesting we ignore pain. He's suggesting we decide to see more than the pain. That simple act of attention shifts the ground beneath us. Gratitude, both in Stoicism and in game, is not emotion. It's perspective. It's the first conscious choice toward resilience. Next comes acceptance. Greg says that suffering often comes not from what happens, but from our resistance to it. Epictetus said it thousands of years earlier. Some things are in our control and some are not. His students learned that peace begins with discernment, knowing which is which. Acceptance, in both Greg's model and the Stoic teaching, is not passive. It's an active, courageous decision to face life as it is before we decide how to respond. When I hear Greg describe acceptance as psychological flexibility, I hear a modern echo of the same ancient truth, that freedom begins when we stop arguing with reality. The Stoics and Greg would both say acceptance is the doorway through which resilience walks in. The decision to live deliberately. From there, Greg moves to intention. He reminds us that our thoughts, repeated and focused, shape the architecture of the mind. The Stoics called this virtue, the daily practice of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. For them, virtue wasn't lofty. It was practical. You decided how to act regardless of what life delivered. Greg's intention is much the same, the decision to live deliberately rather than automatically. It's about choosing our inner weather, no matter the storm outside. When we act with intention, we practice the essence of resilience, the conscious choice to steer rather than drift. The Stoic would call that discipline of mind. Greg calls it rewiring the brain. Either way, it's the same muscle of decision, strengthened one choice at a time. Non-judgment, the decision to see clearly. Finally, there is non-judgment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your judgment of it." Craig might say that when we release judgment, we create space for peace. To be non-judgmental isn't to be indifferent. It's to be curious. It's to look at a situation and say, let me see what's true before I decide what it means. In both Stoicism and game, non-judgment is the mind's deep breath, the pause before reaction, the space where wisdom can enter. And that pause is the birthplace of resilience. Because in that quiet space, we get to decide not what happens, but who we will be as it happens. Practice daily is what steadies us. So maybe resilience isn't something we build once and for all. Maybe it's something we decide moment by moment, thought by thought. We choose gratitude. We choose acceptance. We choose intention. We choose non-judgment. And in those choices, we choose peace. Because in the end, resilience isn't about surviving what comes next. It's about deciding every time the kind of person we will be when it does.